Hey everybody, today I am doing another video where I posed a question, you guys responded, and here we're going to do some of my reactions to what you guys said. The question was, what is your favorite psychedelic movie and why? So here we go. Would Un Chien Andalou be an answer? If so, it's because it's equally hilarious and horrifying. Yeah, Un Chien Andalou counts, of course it counts. That's a Luis Buñuel film and Salvador Dali, two of the most psychedelic people that ever existed. Un Chien Andalou is an amazing film. It's a short film, of course, probably one of the most famous short films that ever existed. And yeah, it came out in the 1920s. That don't matter though. It's still very psychedelic. A lot of movies actually of that time, pre-code, are quite psychedelic. And yeah, it's basically a dream that they're trying to create there. So it's just a lot of images. They don't seem to connect, but when you really look at them, they certainly do. A lot of things at the beginning of the short film are mirrored in the second half. I know that Dali and Buñuel both don't like it when people overanalyze their films because, sorry, this particular film, just because, you know, they just wanted it to be a dream. They didn't want it to necessarily mean anything, and they don't like that people take it that seriously. And I like that because you can kind of tell there's a sort of humor to it, as you say here, that, you know, there is a comedy aspect to it in a way. But even so, I mean, even, you know, as we all know with dreams, they do tell us a lot about the subconscious. It tells us a lot about what's hidden underneath that maybe you don't know or you don't realize, and that's what your dreams are there to tell you. And when I watch the film, I see all kinds of things. I sense an internal struggle with masculinity, as well as femininity, and maybe a major struggle with sexuality for sure, and just primal desire in general. Essentially what the psychedelic experience can capture. But yeah, no, I mean, some of the images in this film stick with you forever. It's really a cool experience, so I do recommend it. And it's a short film. I mean, I think my review for it is longer than the actual movie, and you can watch it on YouTube, so, you know, why not? The Red Shoes, maybe not super trippy, but a revelation of the psyche from within. Oh yeah. Yeah, it's, there is a part of the film that's very trippy. And that would be the kind of halfway through the movie when they do the ballet sequence, the Red Shoes ballet, which is, I want to say, about 17 or 18 minutes long. And it is one of the most breathtaking things in film. It inspired me. It's one of the things that inspired me to review movies. And yeah, like it's meant to be, you think it's just going to be a performance, just a typical performance that people watch. But no, it becomes this weird mix of performance and like this hazy dream. Yeah, it does become very psychedelic. They're using all kinds of very unique special effects to kind of achieve that effect. You're feeling all kinds of things. It's very angelic and beautiful, and then at other times it's tragic, other times it's scary. It has kind of an interesting kind of German expressionist thing going on there. But yeah, it really kind of reflects a kind of an unconscious sort of desire, again, like Un Chien Andalou does, and that internal conflict between those three main characters, Lermontov, Vicky, and Julian, the composer. Michael Powell is one of the great filmmakers. He's one of my favorites, and he's just so visual, and the colors are so spectacular. It has almost kind of a Monet pastel look to it, and it's just, he takes you to places very few filmmakers do. And that's part of why I think he can capture a sort of psychedelic feel. 2001: A Space Odyssey taps into an inner level of consciousness, making you feel space and time. Oh yeah. I mean, yeah, I know people are probably like, oh really, you're gonna do 2001? But no, I mean, I know a lot of people talk about that movie, so it feels like it's a cliche or whatever, but really if you just get rid of all the noise and everything and just watch the film, there's a reason why it's always brought up as one of the more psychedelic films. And what you say here is great. You know, like the inner level of consciousness making you feel space and time is very, very accurate, and I think completely encapsulates everything. Yes, it makes you feel space and time because it is so kind of soporific and meditative and so slow. And when a movie can slow things down like that, where you just kind of get hypnotized into the experience, it really does change the way your brain receives information. You know, it's kind of like at first your minds might start trailing off and think, oh, what am I going to have for dinner? Oh, I gotta go to the laundry later and all that. But then after a while, those start to melt away and you are completely one with the experience. And that is pure psychedelicness. I saw the film for the first time. I was very young. I was not experienced, as they say. So I didn't really understand the whole psychedelic aspects of it. I was like probably 16 or something, but I knew it made me feel something that was very different. My reaction to how I watched the film was very different than any other film I had seen. And then I got older and watched it again after being more experienced, and yeah, it changed everything. I think the scene, the Beyond the Infinite, the last section of the film is like essentially like Kubrick's DMT experience, because it's like plunging you past this, anything that existence can create here, into this other dimension, into this whole other experience, to where time completely doesn't exist. And by the end, you're in this construct and you are yourself. You turn around and you see yourself as an old man. And then that old man sees himself as a baby. And it's the whole death and rebirth, cyclical evolution sort of thing that is essential to the psychedelic experience on a deeper level. So yeah, I mean, 2001 is a huge one. Into the Void. It helped me realize my own mortality and also its DMT accuracy. Yes, absolutely. That movie will help you realize your own mortality, because it's adapting kind of the dimethyltryptamine philosophy. And yeah, you're right. DMT accuracy. There is a sequence at the beginning of the film in the first few minutes that really has some visuals that are a lot like the dimethyltryptamine experience for sure. And I mean, Gaspar Noé, I think he's one of the great psychedelic filmmakers. Very few people can capture the psychedelic experience like he does, especially just in terms of the modern filmmakers. And I'm not going to go too much into it because I'd be here all day. It's a very complex film, and I've reviewed it, so you can watch that. But yeah, no, everything you say here is true. It does make you question your own mortality. It has its issues, but it's a really strong piece visually, especially. It's using all kinds of really incredible, visually arresting sorts of techniques. And some people see the whole film as a DMT trip, not just the beginning, which I think is an interesting way to interpret it. And I also love the way at the beginning of the movie it says enter in big letters, the whole movie goes, and then right after the last frame it says the void. That's awesome. Gaspar Noé thinks like that. Dumbo, pink elephants on parade sequence, remains one of the trippiest sequences ever put on film. I remember watching it as a kid thinking, how high were these animators? I thought the same thing when I saw it, and I think that a lot about a lot of animators, especially in like the 30s and the 40s. I just thought that was a really unique time for Disney animated films, one of the better times. And yeah, I personally, for me, it's Fantasia, I think, is their most trippy and the most bold, the most daring. But I know what you're talking about, because honestly, I think I've seen Dumbo once and I was older. It wasn't until I was like 18 or something that I saw it. And I don't really remember that much about it. I just remember the sequence you're talking about. I remember just thinking it was so cool. I remember like the bubbles and them changing into different things. And it was all on a black background, so everything sticks out. And yeah, wacky and weird. Those animators were really pushing. And I know, I think if I remember correctly, Dumbo is supposed to be, you know, like drunk, but we know what was really going on. That shit was laced. Mulholland Drive. Although I haven't seen everything from Lynch, this was just mesmerizing, flawless masterpiece. Yes, David Lynch is known for kind of that psychedelic thing, being very conscious of film being, you know, an interpretation of the dream world. And he really kind of wants to pick that apart in a way that a lot of filmmakers aren't willing to do. And yeah, Mulholland Drive, I say, like, I mean, he's made a lot of psychedelic films. Probably Inland Empire was probably his most ambitious, though it doesn't fully come together for me. But Mulholland Drive is the one that is the most cohesive and the one that is really his magnum opus, in my view. And yeah, it feels like this huge construct where everything you thought you knew about the way that life is supposed to work, the way that narrative is supposed to work, is just completely, you know, pulled out from under you, and all of it gets warped and garbled, and you kind of have to make sense of it in that way. But yet through that, you find that it means even more. And that's what's so brilliant about it, is as it becomes less cohesive, the more the emotion comes through, because nothing is concrete. And that to me is a key part of the psychedelic philosophy that Lynch understands. Gaspar Noé's Climax. It's the closest thing I have experienced to being to sitting in a theater with un-LSD. I'm guessing you mean with LSD, or being under the influence. The way the entire film is shot, the continuous camera takes, the movement of the actors, the bombastic music to it, it comes together breathlessly. Yeah, of course. I mean, another Gaspar Noé film, and you know, how many times have I talked about Climax on this channel? We should start doing a drinking game for it. I think what's really interesting, though, is how different it is from Into the Void in a lot of ways. Into the Void uses a lot of specific tricks to give you, like, the visuals of what it's like on a trip, whereas this one doesn't do any of that. It's all kind of implied. And I actually really like that. It does feel like the escalating experience, as though, you know, it's very slow. I mean, it's not until maybe an hour in that, you know, things start kicking in. The LSD starts kicking in for the characters in the movie. So it's very, very slow. And just slowly the camera starts to tilt just a little bit. And here, like it's rocking on a boat, and then whoa. And it just gives you that feeling of like you're losing control slowly, which is absolutely accurate, because that's kind of like the first hour when you're under the influence. It's kind of like, am I feeling it? I don't know. And I get that sense from this film, and it is very nightmarish, but it's all done just through the camera. Yeah, as you say, the constant movements and everything, like, you know, how it's all connected, the continuous camera movements. A lot of it is the neons, the colors. My favorite part of the film is that kind of possession-inspired sequence where Selva kind of has that moment where she completely breaks into like physical craziness, and almost like, you know, she's dancing, because she's like, all the characters are dancers right on the edge of that abstraction. And that's another thing that's really cool about it. But she's just letting herself go. And that's, you know, essentially her peak. But as she's doing it, she's going into this hallway, and there's all that red light, as though she's like entering the womb or something. She's entering this part of the psyche and letting it just fly. And I think that is just a harrowing, incredibly cool sequence. And then having the Aphex Twin in the background is just genius. Cronis Oxy makes you question your entire worldview, the editing, the cinematography, Philip Glass's compositions, or something else. A film that leaves an impact on you without a single word of dialogue. Definitely a mind-blowing trip. I am so glad you said that, because I felt that for so long and felt like I was the only one. I've said that to other people. I've said, Cronis Oxy is really psychedelic, and they're like, no, it's not. And I always felt alone in that, so I'm so glad to hear that there's somebody else out there who feels the same way. I first saw that movie in college. I was in a film class, like an introductory film class, and it was like stadium seating, so we had like a big projector so we could watch the movie and really kind of experience it almost like a theatrical experience. And look, it was 8 in the morning. It was an 8 o'clock class, and, you know, definitely too early to be high for anybody. Most people were half asleep anyway. I remember just being riveted by the experience. And everyone else was just like, oh, this movie is so boring, I hate it. And I was like, are y'all nuts? I thought it was one of the most, like, I mean, it just transports you. Very similarly to 2001 in a lot of ways. As I mentioned, that kind of hypnotic, kind of soporific feel where it kind of lulls you into the experience, because it's very slow. It's just those images, and little by little you get hypnotized by the rhythm of things, by the experience of it, and seeing all of mankind as though they are little red ants on a hill. It's that perspective in the psychedelic experience that helps you to realize not to take life so seriously. And I feel like this movie has that. And yes, as you say, the Philip Glass compositions and all really add to the experience. That's one of my favorite scores, actually, for a film. But I think like the key here, even like what I said with this one, but also in like a Gaspar Noé film, the point is that yes, they want you to see things from like a bird's eye view, and see all of these people as though they're like, you know, an experiment. And so that way you're kind of detached from the experience. That way you can kind of play with it and have fun, and all those boundaries you normally set for narrative and stuff like that no longer really exist. And that's ultimately kind of what the psychedelic experience says to me too, is having fun, letting go. The Holy Mountain, not just psychedelic, but an amazing commentary on society, religion, and culture. Yeah, I think in terms of just the philosophy, adapting the entire philosophy and making that into a narrative and an experience and a commentary, as you say, Holy Mountain would be one of the best examples of that. And I think what's so great about it is because it's so ambitious in that regard. And I think one thing people sometimes neglect is how funny it is. It's very oddly funny. It's scatological. It's cheeky. It has like a satirical feel to it. Again, in a way where it's kind of poking fun at ourselves and not taking things so seriously. There's one section in the film at the very end that, to me, is one of the most psychedelic scenes I've ever seen. Of course, when I watched the film the first time, I was not sober. But even watching it sober, it's just incredible. It's the part where everybody is going up the mountain, or they're walking towards the mountain, and you see each person, and you get to kind of live their nightmares, as though they're kind of purging all of these fears and pains out of themselves. And it's an ego death, essentially, being faced with the scariest things you could possibly think of. That, to me, is like a heroic dose of something. Sometimes it's exhausting, because it just feels like the intensity is just pounding you over and over and over, to the point where you feel so weakened, and yet through that you feel empowered, like you're really pushing towards something important. You're pushing towards facing yourself in a way. And I feel that so strongly by watching that particular sequence. That's when you kind of overcome a lot of things and realize you're stronger than you thought you were. And that's when you realize all of this really could just be an illusion. So why does it matter so much? And I feel like that's what this is. This is a purging of that, and realizing all of that with that melody that plays in the background. As you see all these horrific images from everyone's minds, it just keeps repeating over and over and over, and that repetition is just haunting. And I love repetition in those senses, because it helps kind of draw you into it. Honestly, when it comes to psychedelic movies, I think that particular scene is one that hits me personally from my own experiences. Obayashi's 1977 cult classic, House. I have never tried any drugs, but this film truly is a trip unlike any other. It's an engrossing, unforgettable experience more than anything, and I cannot even fathom its existence at times. There's simply nothing like it. Yeah, I mean, you don't have to have taken drugs to recognize when something is psychedelic, I don't think, and House certainly is very, very, very psychedelic. That's a movie I really would like to review. I thought I might do it maybe for Halloween or something like that, but yeah, you want to talk about a movie that separates itself? I saw that movie and thought, what the hell is going on? What am I feeling? What is this? It is it's like a horror-y. It's like a weird sort of comedy, surrealist horror film, but so visually arresting, and just a complete mindfuck. If you want to be just plunged in a completely different feeling, a completely different atmosphere, that is the one. It's been a while since I've seen it, so I can't go into the sequences that really felt the most psychedelic, but I will let you know when I review it. Apocalypse Now. The whole thing is a descent further into madness. Exploring the human psyche, it feels at times like an unrelenting nightmare, as Sheen passes through this broken landscape with no option but to press on and see it through. Also, the end by the doors. Yeah, you've said it all here, and you said it maybe better than I could. I agree with everything you're saying. I don't look at Apocalypse Now as a war film, a movie about Vietnam. To me, that is more kind of the catalyst for the deeper psychedelic experience. To me, it is the experience of facing death and letting go, facing the self. It's the ego death, really. That this movie is a journey into the ego death, and just that feeling, that kind of mirage-y, kind of hazy, dreamlike feeling of them just constantly floating upriver. The slowness of it as well really kind of helps you, again, fall into the experience in a very hypnotizing way, like a lot of these psychedelic films do. It's really one of the more extraordinary American movies I've ever seen, and I reviewed it very recently, and so I'm not going to go too much into it, because I actually think that was one of my better reviews, and I really go into a lot of the psychedelic stuff in there better than I could here. But just one thing that sticks out to me, in the beginning of the movie, you hear the audio of Marlon Brando's character saying, talking about just crawling right on the edge of a razor blade. And that's the perfect image. That is, to me, what the movie is, just right on the edge, a very dangerous place to be, like being plunged into the 7 circles of hell to see what you're made of, to face yourself and all of your fears, all of your pains, and then coming out kind of reborn in a sense. That's what Apocalypse Now is, for me at least, and you can interpret it many ways. Mandy for having Nick Cage, the consummate psychedelic actor. The cinematography and soundtrack all add to the fever dream with real emotion. Yes, yes, yes. It is a fever dream, perfect way to describe it. It has that feverish kind of lulling feeling. Again, a very slow sort of experience. And if you saw the director's film before that, it also is very heavily psychedelic, very kind of inspired by the LSD experience. Mandy in particular, though, I honestly think this might be one of my favorite Nicolas Cage performances, because it is, you know, his brand of kind of the over-the-top, kind of 1920s silent actor sort of thing. It feels much more real. It's like, yes, it's comedic, yes, it's very melodramatic, but I feel it, and I'm scared of him when I watch it. He's like a beast at times, very primal, and a perfect person to be leading us through this Odyssey. There are multiple psychedelic experiences in the movie, or sequences, I should say. One that always really gets me is the part where Mandy is captured and she's drugged, and everything kind of has that like slow motion LSD experience. But when she starts laughing, you know, the whole movie has that kind of overacting, as I said, like right on the edge of farce. She starts laughing and laughing and laughing bigger and bigger and bigger to the point where it's terrifying. I love that part because that is so close to like a psychedelic experience as it's like kicking in. It's like the roller coaster is going right before it goes, and the feeling of being in a situation like that where it feels like somebody's laughing at you. I'm sure she wasn't laughing very much, or maybe even at all, but it's all just kind of distorted through that psychedelic experience. So her laughter gets louder and louder, and it's a nightmare for him. It's humiliating. But when you are in the presence of someone or something that you don't trust, it gets so much bigger in your mind, and that nightmarishness, it can really overwhelm you. And I thought, this is excellent. This is a good kind of grasp on it. There are so many movies that capture the psychedelic experience, and it doesn't necessarily have to be, you know, ones that are more typical, like The Trip or Easy Rider. You know, there's all kinds of different movies that give you that psychedelic feeling. So I find it actually really interesting to explore more of those. But yeah, you guys, a lot of the choices you had here were typical, but some of you had some really interesting ones. Fellini's another one that comes to mind that I think would be really interesting to explore from a psychedelic sort of point of view, psychedelic perspective. But yeah, this is my favorite thing to talk about. My favorite thing is just kind of the surreal psychedelic movie, because yeah, I think it taps more into who we are as people and what all of this is around us more than anything else, and that's just really interesting to me. So yeah, no, this was fun. Thank you guys for answering the questions, and that's the video. I have all my social media information and stuff below. You can watch more videos here, and you can subscribe if you want to. Catch you next time.